Q. The first contact was bound to happen. The galaxy, let alone the universe, was simply too big for just a singular species to develop intelligence in. Any delay in contact only meant a heightening of the eventual culture shock. In humanity's case, this culture shock meant the complete extinction of mankind as it had come to be known. Almost a billion years old, the alien species known as Q were galactic nomads, traveling from one spiral arm to another in epoch-spanning migrations. During their travels, they constantly improved and changed themselves until they became masters of genetic and nanotechnological manipulation. With this ability to control the material world, they assumed a religious, self-imposed mission to remake the universe as they saw fit. Powerful as gods, Q saw themselves as the divine harbingers of the future. This dogma was rooted in what had been a benevolent attempt to protect the race from its own power. However, blind, unquestioning obedience had made monsters of the Q. To them, humanity, with all of its relative glories, was nothing more than a transmutable subject. Within less than 1,000 years, every human world was destroyed, depopulated, or even worse, changed. Despite the fervent rearmament, the colonies could achieve nothing against its billion-year-old foes, save for a few flashes of ephemeral resistance. Humanity, once the rulers of the stars, was now extinct. However, humans were not. Man extinguished. The worlds of humanity, gardens of terraformed paradise, seemed strangely empty to the Q. Often there were no raw materials available other than people, their cities, and a few basic niches of ecology, populated by genetically modified animals and plants from Earth. This was because humans had erased the original alien ecologies in the first place. Offended by another race trying to remake the universe, the Q set forth to punish these infidels by using them as the building materials of their vision. While this led to a complete extinguishment of human sentience, it also saved the species by preserving its genetic heritage in a myriad of strange new forms. Populated by ersatz humans, now in every guise from wild animals to pets to genetically modified tools, Q reigned supreme for 40 million years on the worlds of our galaxy. They erected kilometer-high monuments and changed the surfaces of entire worlds, apparently to whim. One day, they departed as they came, for theirs was a never-ending quest, and they could not stop until they had swept through the entire cosmos. Behind them, the Q left 1,000 worlds, each filled with bizarre creatures and ecologies that had once been men. Most of them perished right after their caretakers left. Others lasted a little longer to succumb to long-term instabilities. On a precious few worlds, descendants of people actually managed to survive. In them lay the fate of the species, now divided and differentiated beyond recognition. Enter the Gravitals, descendants of the Ruin Haunters. After the lessons of the Q, the Second Galactic Empire kept a constant watch against alien invasion. Ironically, they neglected to look among themselves. The second great invasion of the galaxy came not from outside, but from within. The Ruin Haunters, who were lucky enough to inherit the secrets of the Starmen and the Q when other species were mere animals, had experienced a tremendous advance in technological prowess. All in all, they were as sophisticated as, if not more, than the asteromorphs of the void, But their ascendancy was not a sane one. Recall that most ruin haunters were already deranged with a twisted assumption of being the sole inheritors of the starmen. They refused to communicate with their relatives on other planets and kept to their own affairs. This neurotic hubris assumed truly dangerous proportions after the ruin haunters modified themselves. The origin of this modification lay in an earlier catastrophe. The ruin haunter's sun was undergoing a rapid phase of expansion, and the species, advanced as it was, could do nothing to stop the process. So the haunters did the next best thing and changed their bodies. The infernal conditions of the solar expansion meant that a biological reconstruction was totally out of the question. Thus, the haunters replaced their bodies with machines, floating spheres of metal that moved and molded their environment through subtle manipulations of gravity fields. In earlier versions, the spheres still cradled the organic brains of the last haunters, but in successive generations, ways to contain the mind within quantum computers were devised, and the transformation became absolute. The ruin haunters were replaced by the completely mechanical gravitals. While not even organic, the gravital still retained human dreams, human ambitions, and human delusions of grandeur. This, combined with mechanical bodies that allowed them to cross space with ease, made interstellar war a frightening possibility. Machine invasion. It took a long time for the gravital to prepare. Propulsion systems were perfected and new bodies capable of withstanding the interstellar jumps were devised. But when they finally decided that the time was nigh, nothing survived the slaughter. The invasion followed a brutally simple plan. The target world's suns were blockaded, and their light was trapped behind specially constructed million-mile sails. If the dying worlds managed to resist, an asteroid or two finished them off. Enormous invasion fleets were built, but it was rarely necessary to deploy them. The machines had caught their cousins completely off guard. The Great Dying, all of which occurred in a relatively quick 10,000-year period, stretched the boundaries of genocide and horror. Almost all of the new human species, unique beings who had endured mass extinctions, navigated evolutionary knife edges, and survived to build worlds of their own, vanished without a trace. Even the Q had been loyal to life. They had distorted and subjugated their victims, but in the end, they had allowed them to survive. To the machines, however, life was a luxury. Such thorough ruthlessness was not, ironically, born out of any kind of actual hatred. The gravital, long accustomed to their mechanical bodies, simply didn't acknowledge the life of their organic cousins. When this apathy was mixed with their insane claims as the sole heirs of the Starmen, the extinctions were carried out with the banality of, say, an engineer tearing down an abandoned building. Under the reign of the machines, the galaxy entered a brand new dark age. When considering the invasion, the machine invasion brought on the greatest wave of extinctions the galaxy had ever seen, for it was not a simple act of war by one species against another, but a systemized destruction of life itself. When considering such a vast event, it's easy to get lost in romantic delusions. It's almost as easy to write off the gravital as evil as it is to consider the entire episode as a nihilistic end of everything kind of scenario. Both of these approaches are, as they would be in any historical situation, monumental fallacies. To begin with, the gravital were not evil, at least not to their own perception. These beings, although mechanical, still lived their lives as individuals and operated inside coherent societies. They had surrendered their organic heritage, but their minds were not the cold, calculating engines of true machines. Even after giving orders that would destroy 1 billion souls, a gravital would have a home to go to, and as incredibly as it might sound, a family and a circle of friends towards which it felt genuine affection. Despite being endowed with compassion, Their harsh treatment of the organics was the result of, as mentioned before, a simple inability to understand their right to live. Furthermore, the gravital did not constitute a singular, indivisible whole whose entire purpose was to wreck the universe. True, their technological advancement had allowed them to form a pan-galactic entity, but within itself, the machine empire was divided into political factions and even religious faiths. Superimposed over these fault lines were the daily lives and personal affairs of families and individuals. Like any sentient being, they had a sense of identity and thus differing agendas. Nor did the machine invasion mean the end of everything. There certainly was a widespread destruction of life, but what was lost was only organic life, consuming energy, directing it for reproduction, thought, and even evolution. The machines were as alive as any carbon based organism. Despite the turnover, life of a sort survived, and as would be seen, even preserved some of its organic predecessors.